constantly paying rent to the state, on that property. Now, isn't that, kind of what peasants had to do in the Middle Ages?
Right.
They have to pay the state for the right to farm their own property. Mm-hmm. And we're supposed to have come beyond that.
Apparently not, unfortunately.
It's a shackle on the ownership of free property, or the free ownership of property. You never really own your property because you're always paying taxes on it.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think that's a huge problem overall, is how through various ways, various people are trying to erode personal property rights, granted by the Constitution. It definitely feels nowadays that you never truly own anything, that, easily some bank or, some government could come take what you have.
I have no problem with the state imposing taxes. The state has to have a way to fund its activities. But,
absolutely.
Part of the problem is that the state anymore tries to do too much. So it spends too much money, so it has to tax too much stuff to support those activities. Mm-hmm. And it's ridiculous. I mean, show me any place in the United States Constitution where the federal government's supposed to have anything to do with education. Right. Or energy.
Well, I'm all for getting rid of the federal U.S. Department of Education.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, it just kind of, it always baffles me whenever people seem to think that, the federal government needs to get involved in this or get involved in that. Whenever you look at the, the Board of Education, what has education become ever since the federal government got involved?
Well, in my estimation, the surest way to make sure that an undertaking is going to fail is to get the federal government involved in it.
Right.
Now, I send my tax dollars off to Washington, D.C., to the Department of Education, who then send it back to me at missing several cents on the dollar. Wouldn't it be more efficient use of my tax dollars for me to pay that money directly to the Indianapolis school system in taxes?
Absolutely.
I send it off in a pipeline. It leaks money all the way there and all the way back. And by the time it gets back, 70 cents of the dollar I sent off to Washington, D.C. is all that's coming back. Mm-hmm. Well, that's ridiculous.
Right, and my impression is that, it's all relative, but Indiana tends to do fairly well with their budgeting, not necessarily overall, but relative to the other states.
California, for example.
Yeah, or even Illinois.
Yeah.
But with that said, I would really like to see Indiana get away from federal subsidization. I've already kind of talked about, the National Guard system, but a lot of this throughout at least my lifetime, the federal highway money, things of that nature, where it's basically bribery.
Well, when you look at it, the federal highway money is actually the only money that constitutionally states should be receiving from the federal government.
Okay, good point, sir. But
granted, you've got to call I-70 a military road or a post road, but mm-hmm. When you use that justification, the federal government does have a responsibility to keep it up, and I think that's one of the things where a federal project does actually contribute to the well-being of interstate commerce as much as they like to stretch the Commerce Clause around.
Well, yeah, that's true, sir. But I guess where I was going with that is it feels like the federal government holds that over the states' heads. Like, no, you will raise your drinking age. You will raise your smoking age. You will do this. If you want this money.
Speed limit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and there are drawbacks to it, but I would say that highways is one place where the federal government probably has the authority to give states money. I think definitely when it comes, I'm an old soldier myself, so when it comes to programs like the National Guard, I think there should be there should be standards in place whereby the National Guards are trained to the same standards that the Army is. So that when we do go to war, National Guard units are capable of interoperating with with regular Army units and with each other. But as far as being funded to the extent that they are, and that being held over the head of the governors, I think that's a bit much. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, my understanding is that since they revamped the Insurrection Act in 2008, that the president can completely override the governor. For example, if our governor is like, "No, I'm not sending troops to Iran," President Obama could be like, "Oh, yes, you are." So.
Oh yeah, and that's been done before. I mean, Kennedy did it to George Wallace over the desegregation issue. George Wallace called out National Guard troops to enforce this. No, I'm not saying segregation is right. Don't get me wrong here.
No, I understand.
We're not.
What's that?
I said no. We're not the type of people like Ron Paul and the private property. Property laws, whenever, they say, "Oh, so you support segregation. Are you, support that type of activity?" And it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. But sorry, go ahead with your point.
But George Wallace called out the National Guard to enforce segregation, and John Kennedy federalized those same troops the next day, with different orders. So, that's the kind of thing you can't be... You can't be doing. I mean, you've got to leave it to the states to enforce laws within their own borders.
And, sir, I wanted to ask you about, what's the progress of your ballot access, both nationally and especially here in Indiana? And two, if you guys are running any candidates this go around?
Well, we don't have any candidates as of yet. We're still looking for people who'd like to run as candidates. We're a very small party at this time. We've only been organized about a year in Indiana now. But I'll tell you, this is the second time the Constitution's been in Indiana. It was here for a while, and then it went defunct. And I can't give you the years on that. The secretary is more, our executive committee secretary is more in touch with the history of the party. But we've been as high as having ballot access in 41 states before. This year it's probably going to be in the mid-30s nationwide. I'm thinking around 34 states. We've been partying on the national level in several states to lawsuits to permit ballot access. Tennessee was successful in winning a lawsuit to get ballot access just recently. So that's looking up. In Indiana, we've been promised support from our presidential candidate, Virgil Goode of Virginia, with funding to help us with our ballot access efforts here to get him on the ballot. And we've been working with him on that. It's just party members collecting signatures now, but we're hoping to be able to hire some folks to come into the state and help us out with that in the really near future. I mix the number up all the time, but to get him on the ballot in Indiana, we're looking at 34,195 signatures. So that's quite a chunk for a small party like us to take on, but we're working at one signature at a time.
Great. Another quick question. Here lately, the past 4 years, 2 years, 3 years, past year, have you noticed an increase in the party's growth as far as participants or people that sign on to a third party being the Constitution Party? Have you noticed an increase in attendees? I would say to your party.
I think I've seen a growth in minor parties overall. Just to tell you a bit of my history, I came out of the GOP myself. I was never a member of the GOP, but I tended to vote Republican all the time. And the final straw for me was just, in the last battle over the budget and the debt ceiling increases of last year, when the Republicans had the administration over a barrel and then caved in at the last minute. that was too much for me, and I left. You know, and I had considered the Constitution Party in 2008, but they weren't on the ballot, and so I met Audrey Quackburner, who was functioning as a point of contact here in Indiana to get the Constitution Party stood up, and she talked me into joining the Constitution Party, and here I am a year later, the chairman. So it made a real impression on me. I mean, I found a platform that was finally in line with me 100%. I mean, I'm a big pro-life guy, and the Constitution Party is 100% pro-life. You know, I don't have to put up with pro-life Republicans anymore. So, you know, but I've seen a growth in minor parties overall, and I mean, I'm talking in parties like the Greens and the Libertarian Party. I think has seen significant growth, and I'm surprised at how much interest there's been in the Constitution Party in Indiana. And you know, we're still growing, and boy, it would help us a lot if we could find somebody to run as a candidate this time around. So,
no, and sir, we only have a minute or so left, but they actually helped answer my last burning question. Is so much of what you has said and we've discussed is remarkably very close to the Libertarian Party. So I was going to ask you, you know, why a new party and why not, say, the Libertarian Party? Would it be the pro-life issue?
I think the pro-life issue would be the biggest part of it. I think another, because, you know, you can kind of pick and choose. The Libertarian Party doesn't take a firm stance on life issues, and they tend to be pro-gay marriage as well. And while most people in the Constitution Party realize that that's a state issue and not a national issue, we also realize, you know, most of us see it as a social ill that we really can't afford.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think, you know, were you come down to cases, those would be the two issues that would separate us.
Okay, sir.
Philosophically, I think they tend to stress individual rights a bit more than we do. We tend to stress the rule of law a bit more.
Okay, sir, we are out of the time, but thank you for the interview, and we wish you the best of luck.
Sure. Visit us at cpindiana.org if you want to know more about the party in Indiana.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right.
It's a pleasure having you on.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Bye.